Hey there everyone, I hope you're rocking today. The SEG convention for this year has come and gone, and I saw and took part in some cool Now, there wasn't enough time in the week for me to see everything, but there are some cool things that I did see that made my head turn, which I'll be talking about in this video. But before I get going, if you have any questions or concerns or anything you want me to talk about, just leave them down below. Let's get rocking. Hi there, I'm Dr. Chris, a professional geoscientist. The SEG 2018 convention was held last week in Anaheim, California, and I had the privilege of both attending and presenting research there. The SEG is arguably the biggest gathering of geoscientists from around the world and the premier location to reveal and discuss impressive and cool innovations. I had the chance to check out a few things, but not everything, of course. For instance, I currently only really deal with land seismic, so there's a sizable chunk of offshore innovation I just didn't see. But there were 3 big concepts that I saw that made my head turn. Let's jump right in. Number 1, cloud storage and cloud computing. That seems to me the way of the now, not the way of the future, the way of the now. The biggest thing that I could tell from the convention and from talking to some of the vendors is that the price of cloud storage has dropped immensely over the years. Whether it's AWS or Azure, which is Microsoft, or Google Cloud, the prices are dropping significantly. These price drops means that small to medium-sized companies don't have to spend money on infrastructure for storing their data. They don't have to even contract it out. They can just send their data to one of these cloud providers and pretty much keep it there indefinitely without ever having to upgrade their servers to get more hard drive space. The bigger companies, on the other hand, they've had their cloud systems for a long time. They'd have their giant tape libraries in one country. They would have their processing centers in another. But now with major players like AWS, you've got planet-wide access to moving data around easily and cheaply. Plus, when we're talking about processing, we're not talking just about lighting up hundreds of processors to get your data processed. You're talking about lighting up thousands, tens of thousands of processors. Cloud storage and cloud computing are simply going to phase out certain aspects of the way companies function now. Now, of course, there's a couple problems. The software, say the seismic processing software may not currently work on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. Well, mark my words, that will change. There are very smart people working on those problems right now to take advantage of thousands and tens of thousands of processors rather than the measly few that some of these smaller companies can slam into their servers in the back of their office. I would say that the writing is on the wall for any company who thinks they can somehow compete against these major players. I mean, come on, Amazon? If anybody's trying to compete against these guys, I feel sorry for you. You gotta think twice about your business strategy. Number 2, machine learning. The programming and the concepts are just a little above me right now. I'm not too bad of a programmer. I've made some pretty good programs in the past. And it's obvious to me that any sort of machine learning is a good thing when we're talking about processing or interpreting seismic data. A couple of talks I went to were centered around interpretation and some about, I believe it was, noise attenuation. But one thing that stands out for sure is that in the case of interpretation, we're talking about pattern recognition. Now, before I get going, one thing I'd like to say is I don't necessarily like calling it machine learning or artificial intelligence at this point. To me, it is algorithm maximization. For instance, a scientist will make an algorithm that has a whole bunch of parameters and you just pump it into a giant matrix of operations and out comes a high probability of the answer to that matrix of operations, which is probably literally the definition of machine learning and artificial intelligence. But I just like calling it algorithm optimization. But it seems to me that we're getting to a point where we can eliminate a lot of errors by coding this stuff up such that a machine can maximize the answer we're looking for. The code that we scientists write are going to be far more precise, sensitive, and I would say arguably far more, let's use the word, correct than any human interpreter could do. Just like with cloud storage and cloud computing, machine learning is the way of the now. It's not just the way of the future, and you better get on board. Plus, I, for one, welcome our machine masters. Number 3, smaller wireless nodes. Now this pertains more to onshore seismic, of course, and that's where most of my interests currently lay. On the convention floor, there were several companies that had some very interesting nodes that they were working with, ones that were, not very big, and they were wireless. They had long battery lives. I think one was for sure about 24 days. They had Bluetooth capabilities, so you can do QC in the field to make sure that your node is working properly, to make sure that you're acquiring. But the one that blew my mind was the one that was shown off in the seismic session where I gave my talk, and it was called the Nimble Node, where this thing was tiny, very, very small. I believe they called it a dumb node. And what that means is that they dumbed it down to only the essential parts that you would really need for single component seismic acquisition. They claimed that this node had a 28-day battery life. I believe it was 28. Well, let's go with 28-day battery life. They were tiny little handheld devices. The QC could only happen twice on it. Once before you put it in the ground when you checked it with your handheld device, and once when you pulled it out and plopped it in the machine to make sure that you pulled out the data from the node itself. It was single component piezoelectric. The biggest selling point, especially for me and many people in the audience, was this. They didn't give a price point on these tiny little nimble nodes, but they said they would be cheap enough that you could put 4 times, 5 times, 6 times as many of them out in the field. That means you could tighten up the geophone spacing, and you could accept a level of failure rate on these things because they are dumbed down that would allow you to sample the wave field even if there was a 10% failure rate on these guys. Their claim was they were going to deliver the first 1 million nodes, if my memory serves me correctly, 1 million nodes in 2019. If these things can really perform, I think most of the other node builders in the world might be shaking in their boots right about now. And those were the top things that I saw at the SEG 2018 convention. Of course, I didn't catch everything, but if there's something that you thought was pretty awesome, just leave it down below and we'll get a conversation going about it. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, add me to your LinkedIn, or even better, share my videos through your networks. Till next time, I'm Dr. Chris. Keep rocking.